ready to go for the second round. So now we have Mike Fuller, and I feel like he's pretty much a regional expert on AWS cost management and billing. He's got all 5 certs as well. Feels like it's a bit more common, but I have 0 myself, so it's way ahead of me. Presented at AWS Summits and reInvent on cost management, on right sizing and the tooling that's being developed in Atlassian and how to do things. A really deep understanding of the billing files and how to manipulate the data and visualize it and share it with teams. And works as a principal systems engineer in the cloud engineering team at Atlassian. And welcome, Mike, and thanks very much for coming today.
Yeah, cool. So thanks for coming, guys. So I guess when writing the talk, I wasn't kind of fully sort of understood what the makeup of the room will be, whether we're going to have sort of real beginners or everyone's an expert and you know everything I already know. So what I've done is I've actually sort of divided the talk up into sort of 3 sections. There's some beginner stuff, where I hope it actually will work for the experts as well. There's some intermediately sort of topics, and then I'm going to deep dive. So the breakup is sort of how people get started with detailed billing, what the billing files are, how we do cost allocation at Atlassian, and then I did a talk with Peter at this year's summit, and I explained some high-level concept around pre-processing our billing files, and I'm going to sort of spend a little bit more time unpacking what that actually is at Atlassian, and then I'm going to deep dive on a particular topic within the billing file that's hopefully very interesting and maybe eye-opening for you. So let's get started. Okay, so I want to talk about actually getting the detailed billing files turned on in your accounts. And the first thing to note is that the detailed billing files, they turn on in every paying account. So if you open up a brand new Amazon account all by itself, that is a paying account. When you do consolidated billing, or if you're opening your Amazon accounts through organizations, they're linked to a master payer account or a paying account. And that means that the detailed billing files are isolated at that one top level account. So if you are in a world where you've linked all your accounts to one, you turn on the detailed billing reports in that top level account. If you're in a world where you have 100 unique accounts that are all not linked to each other, full on you're going to have to go turn these things on in 100 different places. So I recommend turn on consolidated billing or start to use organizations now, that's the thing. So to turn it on, we have a few things to do. First thing is we need to create an S3 bucket. Now this bucket gets created in that payer account. It has to be within the account. You can't deliver the files across accounts. So within your master payer account, I recommend you generate a brand new bucket. Don't reuse one that's been laying there with some other files in it. Just create a brand new fresh bucket. Call it whatever you want, my billing files, whatever. It's got a little unique name, so obviously you have to take that into consideration. And in that bucket, you have to apply a policy. And what the policy does is it allows this special account, 386 to write files into your bucket. Now, I'll mention where you get that policy from in a little while, but that policy has to be applied to the bucket. We now go and enable the actual billing files within the master payer account. To do that, you're going to go to the billing dashboard. You're going to go over to the preferences, which is going to bring up this screen. And you're going to type in your bucket name that you just generated. And you hit verify. Of course, you haven't done the policy yet, so it's going to tell you to go away. But the great thing is it actually gives you the policy there. So you grab that policy, go and apply it to your S3 bucket, come back here and hit verify, and you'll get valid bucket, and you can proceed on. And then you can turn on the different billing reports. Now, the biggest of these in this page is the detailed billing report with resources and tags, and the reality is you really need this report. The other files are probably less important to you, but they're actually quite small. So I recommend that if you're just starting out, just tick them all on, and you will start to receive these in your S3 bucket within about 24 hours. There's one last step that you need to do, and that is to set up your cost allocation tags. So you can either do that there at the bottom, or over here at the side, you've got the cost allocation tags page. So what cost allocation tags is not every tag that you generate on every resource within your whole account turns up in the billing files. You actually have to tell Amazon which tags are interesting to you. So what happens is this little list here fills up with all of the possible tags that you have in your account, and it can take up to 24 hours for these to appear. So if you just started using a brand new tag in your account, you have to wait that period. You can kind of force it to speed up the refresh by hitting this button, but it's basically 24 hours. So if you start generating a new business unit tag, wait some time, otherwise you'll start raising support requests and Amazon will tell you just to wait. You're basically going to go through here, pick some of your tags, and then activate them. Now there's a nuance here that on activating tags, that will happen on the next billing run. It's not going to have retrospective to all the billing files existing in your bucket. And if you deactivate a tag, it takes until the next billing cycle, the next billing month, for that tag to drop out of your file. So if on the first of the month you deactivate one, you'll wait until next month before it will fall out of your billing files. What's important here is if you go along and tick all of your tags, you're going to have some pretty big billing files. Right? So you're talking about a handful of bytes for every line that goes into these files that you're adding per tag. You go and turn on 600 tags. I don't want to know how the hell you're managing that. So you probably want to keep it under sort of 10, maybe 15 at most. I think at Atlassian we have around about 7 or 8. It's really a few, and they're the ones that are really important. They're the ones you're going to actually sort of allocate costs by and track service costs and stuff like that. So just you don't get sort of too handsy with the activate tags. So we're done, right? Well, not yet. About 2 years ago, Amazon created a new awesome billing file to replace the DBR, detailed billing report. So it actually is enabled in a separate section of the billing console. This one has a nice wizard. You hit create report and you follow through. So you give your report a name, call it whatever you want. You set the time period for the report. So is it going to aggregate costs at an hourly or a daily level? I recommend you at least have one cost and usage report configured at the hourly level. Include your resource IDs and tags. And they've recently added these new helper for loading the data into Redshift and QuickSight, which gives you the actual statement to give Redshift to load the data into it. And I haven't played with the QuickSight integration, but yeah, it's a little helpers. So if you enable these, though, it does affect the next page, which I'll note. Next. Okay, so we're going to do the bucket again. You can probably share the same billing file bucket that you have already set up. If you haven't done your policy, there is once again that nice little link that gives you the policy to apply to your bucket. The prefix here, that's going to make up a folder in your S3 bucket, and all the billing reports from the curve will go underneath that folder. So I recommend to put it under at least one tier level, because there's a lot of other files that are already going in the bucket if you're using the same bucket. And then here with the compression, if you enable that Redshift helper, it will force you to use gzip. If you don't enable it, you can actually choose between zip and gzip, but I recommend you use gzip. So gzip does streaming decompression, so you can actually start working on the file as you're decompressing it. With zip, you have to unpack the whole thing, and now you can read the first line. So gzip, just much better preferred format. So how big are these billing files? Well, it's obviously going to change with the amount of stuff you have in your accounts. But at Atlassian, we've been running detailed billing files in our account for years. I looked last month, we had 1.9 terabytes of billing files in our bucket, which seems like a lot, but the reality is that $50 cost to us. And on our bill, it's just immaterial. The amount of data that's sitting there in that bucket, historic going back years, I pay that $50 any day of the week. So we've just gone and ticked all these buttons, and now what we have in S3 is 5 different billing reports. What the hell are 5 different billing reports going to tell me? So the monthly report. So this is a cost aggregated up to a monthly level. So C3, 8XL charge, how many of those for the whole month are aggregated up to one line with a cost against it? The cost allocation report is exactly that same thing, but it's actually bringing in those cost allocation tags. So now you've got costs for a C3 8XL that are tagged with product X at this cost for the month, and then cost for C3 8XL at product Y at this much cost for the month. So that's the difference between those two files. Now the detailed billing report, they're at an hourly level aggregation. So the DBR is C3 ADXLs for this hour of the month, total aggregated together this much. And then we add the resources and tags with that file. Now you're actually getting to individual costs for every individual resource. So it's that resource for this hour tagged with this method has cost you this much. So it's basically, we're heading down in granularity. And then the cost and usage report, the good thing about this one is it's every one of those ones. Like, so you choose that daily aggregation or hourly aggregation, whether to include the resources and tags or not. So it depends on exactly how you've configured your curve to exactly sort of the aggregation level and whether or not it has that resource and tag in the actual billing file. I recommend you replicate the detailed billing report with resources and tags, because you have then the sort of direct comparison of the detailed billing report, resources and tags in the new Amazon file type. And it will come into play later as we're talking about. So many files, right? Well, while we enable them, the two that really matter is the DBR-RT and then the curve. So the DBR-RT, it's fixed structure. The columns that it has inside of it are pretty much the same, consistently through time, with the nuance that your cost allocation tags are going to come and go if you're enabling and disabling them. But ultimately, the main sort of structure of the file is consistent day in, day out. Most of your SaaS providers are using this file because it's been around for a long time. It does use one massive zipped up file versus the curve. So the curve is a dynamic structure. The columns that are in it today versus the columns that you'll see in tomorrow's run versus the next day's run, they change all the time. And it depends on whether Amazon are adding new columns to your billing files or the products you're using. So if you use a new product type that you've never used before, that'll actually introduce new data columns to your curve, which will have actual metrics within there that might be interesting for your analytics. So it comes with an actual manifest file, which is just a JSON descriptor, and it describes what you're about to read. And the curve itself comes in many different files. It's already split. It's not this one big massive file. And the SaaS providers are starting to pick this up because there's a lot of data in there that's not in the DBR. And as I said before, it can use gzip versus zip, but just use the gzip format. Just ignore the zip exists.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you use the cur into a redshift?
Yes. So the helper for the redshift will help you load cur into redshift. Yeah. So they actually give you the copy paste command run and the actual redshift.
And the details changing all the time. That doesn't upset redshift.
So what they do is they actually reload a brand new table for the data to go into. I haven't played too much with it because it's not what we do at Atlassian. I had a look through the blog post around it, but yeah, it does have code basically comes with a way of handling the column adjustments. Yeah, I guess it was probably going to be a major pain point, so I think Amazon sort of went down the path of helping people do that. Cool. So another thing that I introduced with the talk with Peter was the way we do cost allocation at Atlassian. So basically, within our detailed billing reports and our curve, we have these tagged costs, and we use those tags to track business units within Atlassian to bundle up their costs and pass it through to our teams. But we all know that not everything's tagged and not everything's taggable, so how do we handle that at Atlassian? So what we do is for every one of our account IDs, we have a mapping to a cost center. So a certain cost center owns an account, and it's up to them to ensure that everything inside their account is tagged. But wherever something's not tagged, the cost will get mapped through to them. So effectively, we're picking up those untagged lines and then giving them through to the team that owns the account. So we want to turn this into this.
I just want the untaggable costs.
So at the talk, I talked about the fact that I looked at our bill and we found that it was about less than 8% of our costs were untaggable. And of the 8%, the majority of those costs were falling through to the right teams using default billing anyway. And I guess the idea would be if we get to a point where the only thing that is left is the untaggable costs, let's work on that. And I guess we keep pushing Amazon, make more stuff taggable, and hopefully the 8% becomes 5, 3. By the time we even get there, it's taggable. And then the other thing I talked about at the talk was this idea that we don't want to do this cost allocation everywhere. Like, we basically were in a world where we had to go to our third-party tooling and try and do cost allocation there. We had our own internal reporting, and we're trying to do cost allocation there. Someone will generate a brand new report, and of course they don't follow the rules on cost allocation that we've made up in our heads, and their report would be different to that person's report, and this becomes an argument. So what we do at Atlassian is we actually take the file that Amazon give us into their S3, into the main S3 bucket. We actually pick that up onto an EC2 instance and pre-process the file. And we generate what we call the golden billing data. And that billing data is what's provided through all of the things, internal tooling and the third-party vendors. And what I didn't get time for at that talk was to really unpack what does that mean? It's like a nice picture on the screen, and now I get a chance to actually cover this a bit more. So we'll go down one level deeper, and we say what we're doing is actually just an S3 bucket event. We're passing that event that when a DBR or a cur file drops in our bucket through to an SQS queue in our analytics account. We have then a process that's watching this queue, and we're generating these two new files. So we actually didn't cover this at the top. We actually generate a file that we use for Athena to query, and a file that looks exactly like the file that Amazon gave us, but we're twiddled with all of the cost allocation tags. We put that back into the master payer account, and we pretend from there that that's the file that Amazon gave us. So what is the detailed billing pipeline? The workflow is basically this. We poll for events on the queue. Something comes in, and we determine, is this a cur or DBR? Because they're slightly different in format. We have to handle them differently. We download some mapping files, which I'll cover in a moment. We download the actual billing file that just got dropped in our input bucket. We decompress the files, whether they're gzip or zip. And then for the DBR, because remember it's this one big massive file, we actually split it out. The cur already comes in a few components. We then use parallel processing on the EC2 instance to actually parallel process every individual file that we now have for the DBR, all those splits that we generated, and for the cur, every individual file we've just downloaded straight from S3. For the DBR, we have to put all our split files that we generated back together again, so we have one big massive file again. We compress them back up into zip and gzip format. We upload those to our output billing files bucket in the master payer account. We also have the files that we've written that are more Athena friendly, and we upload those to our bucket within our analytics account. And we clean up all of the temporary space that we've generated, and then we go back to point one. So there's two pieces that I want to highlight in here. The first is what the hell are mapping files, because they're something that we invented. And effectively we have two. One is that default billing, which account ID maps to a cost center within Atlassian. And the other one is because our teams are really, really creative at coming up with their own cost centers, even though they don't have their own cost centers, or them a spelling mistake problem all over again. So we actually generate a CSV of all of the known bad tags that we've seen in our accounts and map them through to the correct cost centers. So while you could look at shutting down instances when they're not tagged properly or a tag with a bad value, effectively that has a line in the billing file. Like you've shut it down immediately, but there's a line now, 1 hour charge for that thing at that bad tag. So we want to actually get rid of those so that we still have 100% tag coverage. So we basically have this other mapping, and we just maintain that every time we see new invented business units turn up, we generate another line to map them through to the correct business unit.
And then yes.
So we use that with our finance team. So they will see the new business unit turn up. We'll figure out who the hell created it with team lemmings, and then work out, and we'll just insert that to the CSV. And then because this pipeline picks up the latest version of it, it will generate the new on the next billing file drop.
Do you let the people know who created those tags?
Yeah, so part of the finance will basically figure out who did it, talk to them about
Right.
what their real business unit is.
Right.
We'll add it to the mapping file so that it fixes our next billing run, and then we move on. Okay, and then the other one that I want to dig into is parallel process. So the rest of the steps are pretty straightforward, right? We all understand how to unzip a file. We all know how sort of splitting files into different groupings are, uploading, downloading files from S3. So these are the two categories that we need to dig into. So of course the DBR and the cur, they're not 4 columns long. They're probably 30 or 40 columns long. What I've done is I've just picked out a few common columns. You can see you've got to get the idea of what the files look like. What we do is we actually add a new column to our files. This is what I call a virtual tag. So none of our stuff in Atlassian's tagged with cost_allocation. And even if you did, I don't actually copy that to my billing files. But what I do is I actually generate a new column in my file. So then line by line, I will look here for my business unit tag, which is the one that I tell my business to tag on their resources. And if this is missing, I'll go and grab the account ID. I will look it up in the mapping file, so we'll figure out what the value should be. And then I type it in here. And we move down. In this case, we actually have a value, do we? So we bring that across. We paste it here. Now, in this case, it says business units and not unit. So that would actually be something that we add to the bad value mapping. And while we're there, we just correct that. And we do this so on for the millions of lines in our billing file. And effectively what we end up with is this new tag column in our file that was written out that is 100% tag allocated. We keep the original tag there because we want to be able to see how is our tag coverage going, how much of the tag values are we fixing on the way through, how many are we doing via detailed billing, because we get a lot of statistics there. But we're not overriding that data, we're just adding some extra data. We are open sourcing this tool. We're interested to know if you want to run it on your files. The files that it generates out for the Athena bucket, we're going to slowly improve the actual format of that. But effectively, we're able to do really, really good, quick, fast searches on a pay-per-use. So this repo is there. It's not open yet. I'm expecting to have it out in the next week. Get the code in there, and then we'll slowly iterate on the documentation available. You should be able to run this completely isolated to your individual environment. If you set it up in an isolated account and just copy one of your files into the account and just have a look at what it does. Yeah, definitely keen to hear. So hopefully someone in the room is going, but I've got a SaaS provider, why do all this work, right? And what I wanted to do is to sort of prove that there is a need to have your own analytics, especially when you get to scale. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to the most uninteresting graph. And then I'm going to hopefully convince you that it actually is a very interesting graph. So that's the graph. Right? It's 3 months of data, and there's a little lump in the middle. What is this actually doing? This is a single EBS volume. It's 3 months of the volume. We didn't change the volume. It's the same size, it's the same PIOPS. It is just a normal PIOPS volume. We have done nothing. But the cost changes. So why is that? So this is an Athena query. If you're familiar with SQL, you'll be able to read it. If you're not, don't worry. Effectively, all I'm doing here is picking out a handful of columns from the curve. I'm trying to find the lines that are specific for this one volume. I'm asking for the volume usage because I did mention it was a PIOPS. There's some cost of PIOPS. We're talking about the volume usage here. And all I'm getting is 1 hour of usage for the first day of each month. You'll get something like this. And it's very quick, right? I think for Athena is like, a couple of seconds and I get this result. You can see I haven't lied, there's 3 1-hour periods for the first day of the month. The rate for the volume is the same for all 3 months, but yep, definitely, there's a different price here for the 3. And it's because this usage amount is changing, right? And I mentioned I didn't change the size of this volume or its PIOPS settings. So, of course, we'll just go to the pricing API, the pricing page, sorry. I'm sure it's written here that February's more expensive, right? No, it's hidden in plain sight, and it's there. Right. So most of Amazon's costs are per hour. So it's the same cost in every hour of every month of every year. But with EBS, it's not, it's per month. So what does that mean when you actually lay it out? On a 31-day month, there's 744 hours for this cost to be spread out across. So a $125 volume costs 16.8 cents per hour. But if you go to a 28-day month, there's only 672 hours for this to be spread out. And means that it's actually more expensive on February in February's March, February's March. So this is why there's that lump. We've entered February, it's a 28-day month. We went back to March, which is again a 31-day month.
If you went into April, can't it just be a little
There's
bit
actually
more, but
1 month in the year where you go from a 31-day to a 31-day month, right? So,
July, August.
hands up, who does this? 18 days into the month, how was our cost versus the first 18 days into last month? People doing this? Come on, hands up. You should be. We want to know how are we tracking the first 5 days of this month versus the first 5 days of last month. What we're interested in now is how much of that difference there is just because it's a 28-day month and not a 31-day month. Because I want my teams to investigate this, right? I want them to go out and say, hey, we're spending more this month and it's probably a bit more than I was expecting. But I want them to be able to go looking where there's actually something to find. So what we did is we took a standard run-of-the-mill January day and we recalculated the whole day as if it was a February day and worked out what is that difference, what is the gap in there that is actually just the gigabyte month costs. And for us, that's $600. Now most of my teams will probably be pretty interested in a jump of $600 per day. But there's nothing to find, right? It's just because there's 28 days in the month. So what does this mean for us? The data isn't wrong. You do pay more per day. If you turn the volume off 15 days into February, you're going to pay more than if you turn the volume off 15 days into January. So the SaaS providers aren't to blame on their comparison tooling. The file is correct. It's charged by the month. There's nothing wrong there. But what we're having to do is actually educate our teams. We want them to do comparisons month on month. We want them to investigate unexpected spikes, but they have to take into consideration these gigabyte month charges. So it's not just EBS, it's S3, it's snapshot storage. Anywhere where you see GB months written, these are actual costs that are different month on month. And you can see here that this self-analytics allowed us to dig right down underneath the actual pretty graphs that we get out of a SaaS provider and explain a nuance of the graph that most people would probably gloss straight over top of. And it's not that we're trying to replace our SaaS provider with our internal tooling, with our Athena, etc. It's actually we're trying to complement it. Anyway, hope it's been insightful. Covered a few different things, and if you, definitely keen if you wanted to have a look at running the processing pipeline on your own code and maybe running a few Athena queries yourself. As I said, it's not quite there yet, but we'll hopefully in the next week, and then we'll prove the documentation on how to set it up, how to set up your Hive table for Athena, how to do a few sample queries. Yep.
What have you built it in? Is it
It's Python, it's raw Python. It does a few things with syscalls just to get the speed of the actual underlying instance, but yeah, it's pretty much made it.
your job Postgres actually? I think Postgres would do that pretty well. It understands JSON as well. So. But very interesting. And do you augment the data with anything else besides the two things, the mapping and that sort of
Virtual tag, yeah. So so basically the way we've written the code is you can define what the actual actions to take on when it hits the line. So we wanted to make that so that if you do cost allocation completely different to me, you can write those 10 lines of Python. We do actually take some other actions which are more for internal things, like we have service names that are kind of very wide. And we wanted to actually group those services together, so we kind of know that these services are all part of the same service group. So we actually collapsed tag values as well. But effectively, we wanted it, and I guess, we've got to really get there with the docs. We want to be able to have it so that you can just change those 10 lines and make it do whatever you want on those stuff. And it's a little bit of a dangerous tool because now you build a hammer and then all of a sudden everything looks like nails. But effectively used wisely, you can probably do some interesting things.
So I know you mentioned that you specifically look at tag resources, but for example in network, well in your scenario, each cost center has their own account and therefore everything falls in the...
No, so we don't. So we share accounts definitely.
Okay, so how do you manage then the network aspect of it?
So a lot of the network costs do come through tagged. Like so network charges for S3, they're tagged against the S3 bucket.
So egress and as in going out and
So NAT, so underlying for us, yes, the underlying things like the NAT gateways and stuff like that, the actual team that runs those would be the owner of the account in our case. If you've got, like highly segregated, stacked all on the one account, then yeah, you would have to have some cost allocation. So that might be that you're attributing a certain amount of usage by EC2 or service that you're going to then get that network cost and divvy it across the teams. But I think that's really getting into chargeback. Once you can't do cost allocation at the tag level and you're getting down to a level where Amazon's not exposing the individuals, then yeah, you're going to have to enter into chargeback, sort of ratio-based chargeback or something like that.
How do you handle heavy usage charging?
Say that again.
How do you handle heavy usage charging? Because you get the detailed billing report as a single line item for 6 extra hours.
Yeah, RIs are a fun one. With RI lines, we have the injected line items. At the moment, we buy our RIs in the master payer account. So we've gone to regionals and we use purchase at the top. We are working heavily at the moment that we can do now with Athena queries around actually all sorts of ways we can handle RIs. So I think in our ideal world, we'd actually peel back the savings generated and then re-sprinkle the savings by ratio and then effectively get a much more blended rate in our billing files. But yeah, at the moment it's a bit of a lucky lottery, and we're getting to the point now where our tooling's catching up to our thinking, and we might be able to do a lot more in that space. But RI lines are very much, we could probably do 3 talks on that one. Cool. Otherwise, yeah, I'll be floating around for a while, so if there's further questions, definitely come out and grab me. And I'll pass back to Peter to close out.
Thanks very much, and really appreciate Atlassian and yourself open sourcing this sort of IP that you've developed as well, so other customers can share it. So this is the final section, so a few more Q&As, discussion, a bit of a break, and then we'll wrap up. I guess we can ask questions along the lines of any of the mechanisms around getting support from your company, maybe metrics. If we want to talk about RIs a bit further, we can talk about RIs. So yeah, happy to open it up a bit in terms of questions and queries you might have on commercials, essentially. I've got one question for Mike. So I'll just kick it up again. We were having a conversation the other day about the budget and budgeting by business units. Because of the whole blended rate and because of the unblended rate with the random RI allocation by business